Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to what is for us a very special occasion, and it's always a special occasion when we have Mr. Ali Noroozi with us, of course, the Inspector General of Taxation, but in a particular light today. Today we will canvass something that's near and dear to all of your hearts, I suspect, which is the future of the tax profession. And very recently, of course, the Inspector General's office had indicated that there's a review afoot relevant to the future of the tax profession. And of course, we have here today Mr. Ali Noroozi will scope out for us the terms of reference around that review, and in particular, where you that might well be affected by this review and the outcomes of the review can also have input through your membership organisation, Taxation Super Australia, which will certainly be at the forefront of putting your views across, which is really the premise for our discussion here today as well. So I guess, Ali, welcome. I guess just as an initial thought, if you could just share with the audience and the people that have tuned in the space that the Inspector General's office fills now and where you see that evolving to in the context of the fact that there has been some element of evolution with the office so far, and how that ties in to this particular review.
Sure. Look, the office was started in the early 2000s. It was initially set up to look at systemic issues in tax administration. So we would consult to find out what those issues were and then conduct reviews into them, and then our findings would be publicly released with recommendations to either the government or to the tax office. And the ATO responses were always appeared below the recommendations. And to date, we've done around 45 reviews, and I think they have really helped shape the tax administration landscape, and many of you would be aware of that, and you can see that on our website, which is igt.gov.au. Since 1 May 2017, we've had an added function, which is complaints handling or complaints investigations. So from 1 May 2015, we've been receiving complaints from both taxpayers and tax practitioners, and those complaints can be either about the administrative actions of the ATO or the Tax Practitioner Board. And what particularly our new work program, which was announced early this year, has, there were 3 main reviews listed there. 2 of those reviews were as a result of issues identified through our complaint handling or complaint investigation work. And those are about GST refund integrity, and the other one was about PAYGI, so PAYG installment system. Again, the terms of reference for those are on our website, and those reviews are well underway. The review that we are talking about today is the future of the tax profession. We selected that topic based on 2 things. One was a request from the Commissioner to conduct such a review, and the second was concerns raised by you, tax professionals. The review is a very far-reaching review, and really I think there isn't much that you would say was out of scope to the extent it relates to the tax profession. And it is intended to be forward-looking. So we are not looking at existing issues or what may have gone wrong in the past, but we want to have a look, almost, if you like, looking at the crystal ball, seeing where things may be at in the future, and how we can set ourselves up to benefit from those changes. Now, these changes to a large extent are likely to be technological, but there are also social or policy or regulatory changes that may also affect how the tax profession operates in the future. So key changes technologically are the fact that artificial intelligence, robotics are now replacing a lot of what humans used to do in the past, in all aspects of modern life. On top of that, of course, there are existing technologies that are likely to be further developed, such as cloud accounting or blockchain management. All of these things are likely to have a significant effect. And we might find that the tax profession in 5 years or in 10 years' time may look very different. There may be other players that play significant roles that currently either have no role or very small or limited role in the tax profession. So data analysts, software developers, all of these things are likely to play a bigger role. And we need to also determine what now consists of the tax, the tax practitioners themselves. What are they likely to be doing in the, in the future? For example, we are told that some very large firms have developed software that largely can communicate with your accounting system and do most of your GST work for you. So what does that mean, for example? What other work might be automated or otherwise dealt with that tax practitioners are doing now? And I think there is a lot of benefit in trying to or at least predicting what's to come and making sure that we are in the best position, or we are best placed to reap the benefits of some changes and take on the challenges head on. I should also add that a couple of years ago we did do a review into services and support that the tax office provides to tax agents, and there was quite a lot of recommendations we did, as a result of which some improvements have been made to the existing systems. So to some extent we have reviewed some of the existing issues. That doesn't necessarily mean you can't raise them again, but it would probably be helpful if you could be forward-looking, because that's the aim of this review.
Thank you very much, Mr. Noroozi. I might just point out to audience members, those that you have a particular interest in the topic of discussion today. There is an opportunity for you to pose questions to Mr. Noroozi, and we will collate those questions, and in the short time that we have, we may put some of those questions directly to Mr. Noroozi to address as well. In the interim, of course, I have some questions of my own, and I guess you've got a very credentialed history in terms of your professional experience, working as a practitioner yourself. Would there have been in your career instances where you had a shift, as it were, in the profession because of external challenges, technology or otherwise, that you could point to?
Sure. Let me, just before I do that, I forgot to say something. I wanted to obviously thank Tax and Super Australia for giving me this opportunity to speak to your members, and I also should acknowledge submissions that your organisation has made in the past, and our reviews have benefited from it. So I wanted to just say that. I forgot to say it at the outset. In terms of major shifts in the tax profession, of course, the biggest one that comes to mind, although I was probably too young to be in the tax profession at the time, was the shift to self-assessment. Of course, with the shift from full assessment to self-assessment, what that meant was much of the tax inspector role, if you like, that the tax office played up to that stage was basically shifted to the taxpayer and ultimately to tax professionals. So basically, people had the onus to ensure that what they put in their tax return was correct, and in doing so, they might rely on the professional knowledge and experience of tax practitioners to fulfill their obligation. So, that was a significant shift, and as a result of which, we probably have some of the highest incidents of reliance on tax practitioners in the system. But we are not alone. The OECD has recognized the important role what they call tax intermediaries, which effectively means tax practitioners, because really they play a big role in ensuring that taxpayers comply. They're experts in their field. They are under ethical obligations, both because of the professional bodies they might belong to, but also more recently because of the Tax Practitioner Act and the Tax Practitioner Board, and hence they play a very large role both in compliance but also in shaping policy, because they have first-hand experience and their insights are very useful to government agencies and government in determining future tax policy.
Absolutely, and you spot on. The shift from or to self-assessment was certainly a substantial shift in the way we looked at the tax profession at that time, and certainly there's new challenges afoot now, which is, I think, an apt opportunity for this type of review. Now we were told, you mentioned the wide use of tax agents and tax practitioners that we have in Australia. I think the numbers quoted 74% of individual taxpayers use tax agents or intermediaries, and then I think there's something like 95% of businesses using tax agents. So with the advent of technological advances, if you will, and the changing of the landscape as far as regulatory regimes go, etc. The concern, I guess, from a large part of our constituency is that the use of their services is largely relationship based, and it's about them being a trusted advisor. And so the concern often expressed is that to some extent what is happening is a watering down of that relationship, not by them, not by their clients, but by governance over them. For example, we see instances out there of where the Australian taxation officers, taxation office officers are trying to open up a direct line to taxpayers and in some way bypassing the tax agent as the intermediary. And so this is a large part of the concerns that we feel from our constituency. Certainly, will we look as part of the review in the future of the tax profession, a review focused on strengthening that relationship rather than watering it down?
Look, I don't know. I appreciate some of the points you make, but I think you know that I've publicly said that at the end of the day, it's a supply and demand. And to the extent that taxpayers want an independent person or an independent professional to provide them advice with respect to their tax affairs, they're entitled to do so. Also, the tax office is not in a position, nor should it be in a position, to be the sole provider of tax advice or tax services to the public. However, on the other hand, I have heard some criticism about, things like MyTax and certain software products that the ATO has developed, and whether that's replacing or not being particularly helpful to tax practitioners. I don't know whether that's a fair criticism, because even if the tax office hadn't developed these software products, other third-party providers would have developed them. As I said to you earlier, we are already seeing that in the GST space, there are third-party suppliers that are providing products that largely do your compliance work for you. Now, what I would say is that rather than saying to the tax office, well, this is what you should do or shouldn't, I don't think that's particularly productive, because I think other third-party providers will move in that space, even if the ATO doesn't. I think what we should do is say, look, this is the reality. This is where technology is taking us in all aspects of modern life, and we need to first of all see what those changes are, determine what those changes are or are likely to be in the future, and that's the purpose of this review, to then charter a way forward that to the extent possible, works for tax practitioners, works for the taxpayers, works for the tax office, and it's for the good of the entire system. And I think that should be our raison d'etre, if you like. We need to think about all aspects, and we need, at the end of the day, we may be tax practitioners, but we all want what's best for the country as well, and the tax system as a whole.
Absolutely, and I think that's appreciated by the tax profession as a whole, as well, of course, and certainly our constituency. But you understand the underlying concern that we are moving at a pace of change, and we have certainly pockets right across Australia, regional Australia, where we've seen instances of the ATO rolling out new technology platforms that aren't able to be accessed in those regional areas and outlying areas. So the concern is that we may be dancing faster than the music, and that we may trip over as a result. And so I think what our membership are keen on is really that there needs to be a consciousness in this review process of the state of play currently, and we all accept that there are pointers towards a technology advancement, changes in regulation, and that's largely, as you rightly point out, par for the course now. And so it's about, I guess, having a sense of that, but also creating for the tax profession a comfort zone that there is a role to play, notwithstanding.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think anyone, including the Commissioner, including international organisations such as the OECD, have acknowledged the crucial role of the tax office. And certainly my office, both in the terms of reference for this review and the earlier review that I alluded to, we have very much praised and are conscious of the work of tax practitioners. So there's no doubt about that. And I think we do need to be very cognizant of that and point that out. Now, you do raise some valid points about the outages, about particularly those that occurred just before the end of last year. Then there was another interruption in earlier this year, and more recently there was another outage. And I take your point, and that's why if you look at the terms of reference, in addition to looking at the tax profession, I've also looked at the tax office. What does these technological changes mean for the tax office? What kind of service do they need to provide? And I think I've also said in the past that in the terms of reference, if the ATO, and it is consistent with government policy, are digital by default, then if that's the way they want you to deal with them, then the onus on them is to provide a stable system through which tax practitioners as well as taxpayers can interact and communicate with the ATO. And so I've made those points, and I think to his credit, the Commissioner, in his address to the National Press Club recently, did acknowledge that to the extent that they are digital by default, then there is an onus on them to provide a service that is stable, and that it is one that one would expect from an organisation, the size and standing of the tax office. So I think all of those are valid points. Having said that, no IT system, as IT specialists will tell you, are not immune to certain challenges. And that's why in here I've said we also need to talk about contingencies. And contingencies is not about what only tax practitioners do when the systems are down, but also, the tax office employs a considerable number of people. And what do they do when their systems are down? So there are a range of things we need to consider in this review, and certainly all the issues you've raised are ones that we are cognizant of, and we are looking forward to tackle this. I should point out that the closing date for this submission is the end of this month, and we are looking forward to your individual input as well as the collective input that hopefully you'll provide through to Tax and Super Australia. I think this should inform what happens, in the future, and hopefully shape the tax landscape in a positive way moving forward.
Now, that certainly, I think, will fill a lot of people with confidence, Mr. Noroozi, that it's a holistic review, and that it's not a case of throwing out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak, that there are some elements within our current regime that the tax profession is comfortable with, and the review will look at that. I assume we'll take a view that we need to move with change, but there are elements that bear merit, and we might look at perhaps enhancing those elements, and it's certainly not a part of the objective of the review to water down the relationship side of what tax practitioners have with their clients and the like. We can certainly draw confidence from that. Can I just move on to another element that's often been raised, and that's the issue of privacy. With the advancement of technology, there's often a concern about privacy. Is that also at the forefront of your thinking in terms of the review, managing that risk?
Yeah, certainly. Data security is mentioned in the terms of reference. Yes. So yes, it is a concern, and it is one we welcome. Your input on. So certainly I also, more broadly on the issue of privacy versus transparency, I did give a paper which has just been published, I think, to a taxpayer rights conference earlier in the year. Yes, data security in a technological sense is paramount. Yes. It's very important.
Absolutely.
And ATO is a repository of a great deal of financial information, and often sensitive information. So yes, it is of paramount importance. Having said that, more broadly speaking, there is always this dichotomy of because transparency, as they say, there is no better disinfectant than sunshine. So transparency is very important, but taxpayer privacy is also important. I should say that I think increasingly, either by legislation or voluntarily or by leaks or through social media, there is likely to be much more information made bare.
Yes.
We've already had, for example, at the big end of town, the ATO is now required under legislation to disclose certain information about very large companies. There is also the voluntary tax transparency code. At the smaller end of town, although it applies to everyone, it is likely to apply to the smaller player more. It is debtor information that may be made public. And also we've seen through things like journalists and whistleblowing that there is increased amount of worldwide, such as the Panama Papers, the Liechtenstein, the Swiss banks. We've seen lots more information becoming public.
Sure.
And I think that's something we need. I think everybody has a role to play in all of this. Yes, it may have some downside, but again, I think it also has room for improvement. I mean, often the promoters of absolute transparency cite the Scandinavian model, which really lays bare a lot of private or taxpayer information. And obviously, in more Anglo-Saxon countries, privacy has always been guarded well. So these are debates we will continue to have, but I think there is likely, from what we see with the development in this area, that there is likely to be more information in the public space.
Okay. No, absolutely. That's also heartening to hear, because that's also one of the concerns that have been expressed to us is the issue around privacy when we have the technological advancement as such. The other question that often gets asked, not necessarily more widely, but I think it's particularly relevant here, in the sense that the view of the Inspector General's office is that it's essentially operating as a watchdog of the ATO. Would that be a fair comment, would you suggest?
Yes, I've never found being referred to as a dog particularly attractive. But yes, I mean, yes, we scrutinise the work of the ATO.
Okay.
And, you know, the way to look at it is this, that it's not only to ensure that everybody is afforded natural justice, that everybody is treated fairly and due process is followed, and there is fairness in the administration of the tax system, but also it's crucial to voluntary compliance. Research has shown that the biggest or one of the most important promoters of voluntary compliance is when there's actual and perceived fairness in the system, that people have confidence in the system. And one of the things that my office provides is firstly ensuring that fairness in the system exists, but also it promotes or fosters that confidence in the system that's key to voluntary compliance. So I think that the second aspect sometimes is not understood as well.
And I guess that takes me to my next question. This would, remind me if I'm correct, this would really be the first time where it is the Commissioner of Taxation that initiates a review by the Inspector General's office.
Okay, the Commission never initiates. The Commissioner can request, and then it's up to me. But this is not the first time.
Is it not?
No,
okay.
there's certainly been, for example, the previous Commissioner asked me to review the private ruling process,
right,
which we did some time ago. No, it's not the first time.
Okay.
And the government, the minister responsible, can direct me to do a review, but he or she is the only person that can direct me. The Commissioner of Taxation, both Houses of Parliament, or committees thereof can request. But again, whether I do it or not is at my discretion. Even when the minister requests the review, the timing is at my discretion.
Okay.
Having said that, we rarely turn down requests, and I think we are also very mindful of feedback we get from the community, and also themes that emerge from our complaint investigation work.
Certainly.
I think there are some questions.
Yes, do we have some questions coming through? I would thank you, those of you that have taken the time to have put through questions to us in the interim while I've had a chat with Mr. Noroozi. We've got one question coming from Michelle Liu, which looks like a very particular question. And it's about having received a text message about tax payable, this is one of her clients, on lodgement of a tax return before they receive non-lodgement advice from the ATO. So that type of contradiction in the process.
I think what probably these are best suited, where you have these particular issues, that's what our complaint investigation and complaint handling work is about. Could I ask this particular viewer if they could kindly lodge a complaint or approach my office, and then we can investigate. There are electronic forms on our website, igt.gov.au, that you can fill in and send in, but there is also a 1300 number there that you can ring should you wish to. So I think if there are particular issues, they're best handled in that way.
All right, Michelle Liu, some good advice from the Inspector General there for you, and hopefully you will get someone to assist you with this inquiry through that process.
And you're welcome to make reference to this program that you had raised it, and that I had made that request.
Thank you. We have another question from Benjamin Tam, and the question is around that the search function I assume it's on the ATO's website, that it's not very useful and user-friendly, and it's not as good as Google. So I'm not sure whether that's part and parcel of our discussion, but you can probably share some views on that.
I think this was raised in that review that I alluded to earlier. My understanding is that they have improved the search engine, but it is a little bit like Google, that the more you use it, the better it gets. Right. So I think it's a question of, but again, happy to take that further if you want to raise it with us. But that's my understanding, that the search function was improved, and it is of a Google nature, but that it will improve with increased use.
Okay. Another question, Mr. Noroozi, from Peter Zhu, is asking about news about ATO staff, and this comes back to my privacy concern, leaking information out of the ATO, and I guess that's an internal matter for the ATO, but it goes back to the core issue of privacy again, and stopping these leaks emanating from the Australian Taxation
to
Office.
The extent you know, we are doing it. If you've been watching the press or other forms of media, you know that the Senate Economics Reference Committee had requested that I do a review into, and I've accepted to do a review, and I've started it. The terms of reference for that review have been released on our website, and that is into ATO's fraud control management. And we certainly will be looking at issues that you've raised, and I would be very interested to hear from you about particular instances where you know or suspect there might have been a leak from the ATO. We certainly are talking to people at the moment, and we are receiving submissions on this latest review again by the end of this month. And you're welcome again to contact us, either write to us or call us, or come through Tax and Super Australia with your concerns.
Thank you very much, Mr. Noroozi. Benjamin Tam is asking about a lodgement process relevant to lodging an objection with the tax office, and he was then requested to withdraw his objection, and there was a verbal agreement to this effect. He's now been told that after his written objection and written confirmation on this, asking for written confirmation as to the process, he was then told that his objection was rejected. So once again, a very particular scenario.
I think I would again highly recommend that you contact us and provide details so we can investigate. Again, that's best done through our complaint investigation. So if you can either lodge an e-form online, or you can call us and we will investigate. And to the if there has been a miscarriage of the due process, then we'd certainly be looking to raise that with them.
Thank you very much once again, Mr. Noroozi. Benjamin, there's certainly some advice for you to take heed of there. Ramendra Kumar is asking about the PLS, and that lodgement system, and whether there's a time frame for practitioners to have some level of expectation that it'll be fully functional without hitches. Now, that's probably the million-dollar question right there.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's obvious that the ATO is having some challenges in that area. Generally with their IT systems. They have had PwC look at it. They've had Hewlett-Packard look at it. They themselves have looked at it. And certainly the combined outcome of the PwC and their own investigation was released recently. But again, we have been assured that there shouldn't be a problem in tax time previously. So to the extent these problems continue, a more detailed investigation may be necessarily either by my office or another scrutineer agency.
Thank you, Mr. Noroozi. We got any more questions forthcoming from the audience? If not, I might indulge myself with
Sure.
some more questions. Mr. Noroozi, one particular question that's often thrown about is, we know that if we're looking at the tax profession, particular tax practitioners out there in public practice, in terms of the lodgement process, they get benchmarked, as you well know, in terms of their level of lodgement and their timeous lodgement of the returns and compliance instruments that they have to lodge. What often happens is that a lot of these practitioners spend most of the part of the week seeing clients, meeting with clients, taking on board issues, and they would find themselves very often in weekends doing the lodgements. And it's usually during weekends when the ATO systems are down. And so this creates a problem, not just in terms of them not being able to fulfill their lodgement obligations anyway, but now they also get tainted with a black mark of not meeting the required degree of benchmark lodgements. So is that also going to be part and parcel of, I guess, taking a more holistic view of the tax profession and how we can alleviate some of those issues?
Well, certainly, as I've said earlier,
Yes.
that these all goes to the stability and the consistency of service that
Sure.
the ATO needs to provide on its IT platforms.
Yes.
If the expectation is that you deal with them digitally,
Right.
so certainly it's within this. This whole issue of the fact that they're down on weekends was raised in the previous
Yes.
review, and I think ATO agreed to better informing tax practitioners. And I think the ATO has generally taken the approach of not penalising tax agents where they have not met their lodgement deadlines because of ATO outages or maintenance work, whatever. To the extent you feel that you've been penalised for that, you're welcome to raise that with us, and we will look into it.
Okay. No, that's excellent. If we've got any more questions coming through, folks. So, Mr. Noroozi, just on a broader note, clearly there's been some evolution, as you've suggested in your introduction, within the Inspector General's office. With that shift from looking at systems and processes initially, and now taking more of, and having taken on more of the ombudsman role, the old traditional ombudsman role, have you seen a shift in the types of inquiries and complaints, if you will, coming through as part of that change?
Our focus hasn't changed or hasn't drastically changed. It's expanded.
Right.
So at one point we were just, as I said, looking at systemic issues.
Yes.
But I think what has happened is that function has been expanded and complemented, because it makes sense if you're doing the systemic issues that you also look at single complaint. So for example, if you get 200, 300 complaints about the same issue, then you know you have a systemic issue to review. So as I said earlier, what it has done is it has guided to some extent our review function. So as I said earlier, of the 3 reviews that I announced in the work program I would do, 2 of them are because of the themes that have emerged from the complaint investigation process. Of course, we now have a 4th review that I mentioned, and that was because of the the latest allegation of fraud being linked to ATO officers, and which I am now conducting at the request of the Senate Economics Reference Committee.
Right. Okay, so that's interesting, because I think the initial view of the Inspector General's office was the systemic
and
review
that still
process
exists.
role.
That
of course
absolutely
it does.
exists.
Yes.
But we also now do the complaint handling work, and that has complemented and provides us. The complaint handling work is actually very useful in that it provides us real-time insight into what the pressure points are.
Yes.
So I think, and that's why I encourage people to use that service available to them free of charge, where they can get an independent person to look at it, because that provides us with not only being able to help taxpayers with their actual problem, but it also provides us insight as to the health of the system.
Sure. Okay. So we've got a couple of more questions, Mr. Noroozi. John Hopton is asking that, making a comment really, that most practitioners feel that the ATO should issue company tax assessments as company payments would be made on time. So the idea is that there's an actual assessment issued by the Commissioner, because we know with company tax returns, the return itself represents the assessment. And with individuals, of course, it's a little bit different in terms of process. So the suggestion here is that part of the process should be that there should be a separate assessment issued by the Commissioner of Taxation when it comes to corporate taxpayers. Any views on that particular
But there are
comment?
already existing systems. When you lodge your return, then you are supposed to make payment as well, and so there are existing systems. I would be interested to explore the issue further with what this particular viewer has raised, but of course some of it may also be may require legislative change to the extent that he's depending on what exactly he means by what he has raised.
Okay. Yes, I think the question is more about process and whether it will help practitioners. And I think the comment here is that may be of assistance to practitioners if you have the separate assessment. Tony is asking the question, if the ATO does send a text message directly to the taxpayer, which seems to happen these days. And this really causes a lot of frustration amongst tax agents. Why can't the tax agent also be included in that communication? Why is the tax agent sidelined from that communication? And that's the question.
Look, this whole issue of to what extent the tax office should always go through the tax practitioner and to what extent it should go directly to taxpayer has been a question for many years. We do address it in the previous review that we did into support and services that the tax office provides to tax practitioners. We have raised it there, and I think the ATO's response was they never really intend to bypass the tax practitioners. That's not their intention. But my experience has been there are instances where tax practitioners... But you can
understand the perception.
Yes, no, I can understand that. But there are instances also where tax practitioners actually quite like the tax office to approach the taxpayer, such as when they're not paying their tax debt. They feel as if they got a direct call from the tax office, it actually might bring, bear fruit more quickly. So there are instances where, tax practitioners, or at least some tax practitioners, wouldn't mind some direct contact from the ATO. But as I said, I take the point, and the tax practitioners should never be bypassed unless there is good reason to. And to the extent that you feel you have been bypassed in a particular circumstance, then raise that with us and we will chase it through with the tax office.
Just on another note, before I get to our next question, we've had a recent development, which is quite a significant development in terms of the tax legislative process, which is the authority that's now bestowed on the Commissioner of Taxation to do modifications of tax law, issue a modification instrument, not source law as such. But this was, I guess, mooted in the last budget.
I think it's more limited than that. It has become law. I think what you're making reference to, in certain circumstances, the tax office can act to relieve. So it can only benefit the taxpayer any deviation, if you like, from the strict interpretation of the law. He can only act to the extent that it benefits the taxpayer.
Understand.
So there may be instances where you could request the commissioner to exercise that power.
Yes, I guess where I'm going with this is in terms of your brief and your officer's brief, is that something you feel you have scrutiny over in a way that authority or power is executed by the commissioner?
We've certainly have had complaints about certain outcomes, and
Yes.
and the people have then said, well, or we have then questioned, well, why didn't the commissioner exercise this particular power?
Yeah.
So certainly to the extent that people have run into difficulties there or feel as if the commissioner could have exercised this power, they can raise that with us too.
Or perhaps should not have exercised the power?
Well, it would be hard to see because he would only be doing it to help a taxpayer, not the
Yes.
other way around. So they can raise all kinds of things with us. I'm not doubting that.
Yes.
But all I'm saying is it's hard to see
Yeah.
because he would be only acting to benefit, not to not to cause detriment.
That's certainly how it's framed, but I guess from a practitioner's perspective, the view.
Well, have you had any cases, or are you
No,
hypothetically speaking?
I'm highlighting some of the commentary around this that we have fielded, which is, and you may say it may be an overstated perception. It's about the commissioner becoming a lawmaker beyond tax law administrator. Which is the role of the commissioner, really, and so it's that concern.
We did look at this before this was made law. We had a look at it in a review we had done many years ago called Review of Self-Assessment,
Right.
and we looked at all those competing issues, and we made a particular recommendation, which you can go and have a look at. Yes, what you're saying are all the competing factors. Should the enforcer also become the lawmaker? Well, I think they've tried to limit that by giving the commissioner very limited powers.
Yes.
So, of course, if we find that, if we find that it is being, or it is not being used appropriately, then, but until we have concrete examples, and given the fact that it's been framed to be limited and to only act in the in the taxpayer's favour, if you like, then it's probably premature to criticise it too much.
Understand and completely agree. I guess all we wanted to get out of that question was really that the Inspector Inspector General's office sees that as part of your brief to have scrutiny over that.
Yes.
Okay. No, very good. Paul Denton has a question. As the ATO is contacting clients directly, which is a view expressed by many practitioners, they are trying to take tax agents out of the loop, and I think we already canvassed that point.
Yes.
But you can see that is an underlying theme coming
Yes.
through from tax agents. So it is a concern for the tax profession that's not the space they want to evolve into.
Oh, look, I've certainly heard that loud and clear. Certainly when we did the previous review, that was a certain perception. That perception still exists. And one of the things that hopefully this review will do is air of that again, and perhaps to a larger extent, and how that should be shaped moving forward.
Okay.
So if you have a look at the review that I said, the ATO's support and services to tax practitioners, you'll see that we had dealt with it there, and we will continue to deal with it. But again, where you have particular concerns, please raise it with us. As I said, not only we can help that particular incident, but it is then proof and evidence that it's a much bigger issue.
Okay. We have room for a couple of questions. I think this is more commentary. It's bringing us back to the benchmarking point in terms of lodgements, where practitioners feel they get unfairly penalised, which is not due to their own doing.
Yeah, that previous review that I referred to again, the ATO support and services of tax practitioners, does have a chapter on the lodgement, particularly the 80% rule. and we dealt with it then. If it's continuing to be a problem, then please raise your specific concerns with us,
okay,
and we will deal with it through the complaint handling.
So Craig Shipton, I think the point is well made there that you've got a valid argument here in terms of perhaps not all of the factors are taken account of with the benchmarking process, and as was rightly pointed out by Mr. Noroozi, there are avenues open to you where you can raise your complaint and it will be pursued.
We certainly have had, particularly with respect to the 80% rule, we have had a number of complaints which we have dealt with.
I think we've got a couple more, Mr. Noroozi. And there's just to follow on Craig's point about the benchmarking and that all the factors are brought to account in terms of measuring the performance in terms of tax agents, in terms of lodgement. Someone has just added a further comment, Wayne Stadlerland has just added a further comment that he had raised the issue with the ATO and was told he would receive a call back within 5 days, which I assume hasn't happened yet.
Again, all of these, I mean, these specific instances, you really should raise them. As I said to you, I can't encourage you more to raise these issues through our complaint handling, because firstly, we can help you, but it then also gives us real insight into the health of the system.
Absolutely, and that's, I think I'll certainly our audience can take confidence from that. The last point that was raised by Mr. Shipton as well is in regard to the whole platform, the MyGov platform, and that practitioners feel somewhat excluded from that framework as well. Just in terms of, I guess,
we did do a lot of work. Sorry, if I
yes, no, please.
Just because we are running out of time, and I think I know what this might be getting at,
yes,
because we did have quite a lot of concerns about, particularly if somebody had somehow registered for MyGov, yes, then they would become they would start getting all the information directly. The tax practitioner would be bypassed.
Yes.
We actually did raise this with the tax office. The tax office sent some of their officers to go and sit with certain tax practitioners, yes, that had this problem. Yes. They have tried to rectify it. They have rectified it to a large extent.
Yes.
But I know that there are still some issues. Please continue to raise them with us,
okay,
because most of them have been a workaround.
Yes.
Because the MyGov platform wasn't designed just for tax.
Absolutely.
And so there are some issues that it. So what they've done is there are some workarounds which should deal with the bulk of it, but there are still some concerns. Yeah. So again, please raise those, yeah, with us.
Now, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've had a very fruitful discussion over the last hour or so, and we thank Mr. Noroozi for sharing his time with us and for explaining to us the full scope of the review into the future of the tax profession, which I know is near and dear to all our hearts. But perhaps what we've done today is shed a little bit more light on where that review will go, and certainly I want to reiterate the point we made earlier. If you do have any other comments to make, in particular to that review, please let us know. We are putting together at Tax and Super Australia a formal submission which will incorporate and encapsulate all of your views, some of those that you've shared already with us today, and some other views that we will collate in the course of the next few days, a week or so, until the submission is due at the end of this month, Mr. Noroozi. Once again, let me take the opportunity to thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, and to your viewers. They were all good questions, but please, where you do have these specific concerns, raise them with us so we can help you, but also to give us better insight into the health of the tax system. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.